Today, we're diving into the tragic story of Triffie Wadman, who was murdered back in 2011. And while her killer was convicted and put behind bars, that's not where this story ends. Years later, it sparked this incredible legal battle that's asking a really tough question about our responsibility to each other.
So let me ask you this. Imagine you get a text from a friend. They're angry, ranting, maybe even saying some threatening things. You probably just brush it off, right? Figuring they're just venting. But what if they're not? That exact scenario is at the absolute heart of the case we're looking at today, and it poses a really unsettling question. Could a text message that you receive, not one you send, actually land you in court? And this is the text message where it all began. On the night of September 30th, 2011, Trevor Pardy sent this to his cousin Nathan. It's not vague. It's a chilling, direct threat against his ex-girlfriend, Triffie Wadman. And this message wasn't just a key piece of evidence in a murder trial. It became the very foundation for a second, groundbreaking lawsuit years later.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today. Triffie Wadman's daughter, Tara, has filed a civil lawsuit. But here's the thing. It's not just against the man who killed her mother. It also names his cousin, Nathan Pardy, the man who got those texts. And the whole case is built around this fascinating legal idea of a bystander's duty.
The lawsuit centers on this concept called the duty to warn. So what does that mean? Well, essentially, it's the idea that if you have specific, first-hand knowledge that someone is in immediate danger, you might actually have a legal obligation to do something about it, either warn the person who's at risk or call the police.
Now, it's really important to be clear here. This civil case isn't trying to say Nathan Pardy is criminally guilty of murder. No, it's arguing that he was negligent. The claim is that he had this critical information, he had a duty to act, and his failure to do so played a part in Triffie's death. Legal experts are watching this one closely, saying that if it succeeds, it could be a total game changer for how we think about a collective responsibility in stopping intimate partner violence.
To really understand the weight of that civil case, we have to rewind and go back to the night of the murder. Because the criminal case against the killer was built on this damning digital trail of text messages that showed a man who was, at the same time, both incredibly manipulative and brutally honest about his plans.
So just look at this timeline. You can see Trevor Pardy's whole strategy play out. He starts by trying to lay a guilt trip on Triffie Wadman. Then he pushes to meet her in a secluded spot. She's hesitant, so he switches tactics, using a small debt he owes her as leverage, even manufacturing a whole argument about paying her by check, all just to make sure she shows up in person. It's methodical.
But while he's sending all those manipulative texts to Triffie, he's sending messages like this one to his cousin Nathan. There's no game playing here. It's just a cold, clear statement of what he's about to do. He's literally spelling out his plan to commit murder, telling him it's going to happen within a matter of hours.
You see this chilling duality in his messages, right? To Triffie, he's the broken-hearted ex who just wants to talk and pay her back. But to Nathan, he's a man on a mission, planning a homicide. And that stark contrast, that's what made it impossible for him to argue this wasn't premeditated.
Now, Nathan did text him back. He said, "Don't do anything stupid." But Trevor's reply is so revealing. Stupid would be for me not to do anything. It's called justice. You see, in his mind, he had already twisted this act of violence into something he saw as righteous, something he felt he had to do.
So, the big question is, why didn't Nathan call the police? Well, when he testified at the criminal trial, he said he just didn't think his cousin was serious. He figured Trevor was just venting, blowing off steam, and that he'd never actually hurt Triffie in a million years. And that belief, that one assumption, is now the absolute focus of this new civil lawsuit.
All right, let's shift now to the crime scene itself, because what Trevor Pardy did in the moments after he fired the gun is in many ways just as crucial to this story as the shooting itself.
Incredibly, after being shot, Triffie Wadman was able to call 911. And her words, "My ex-boyfriend shot me. He shot me. I'm dying," were all captured on that call. Legally, this is known as a dying declaration, and it's an incredibly powerful piece of evidence because it's the victim identifying her killer with her last breaths. So when police arrived, they found Trevor Pardy standing over Triffie, armed and refusing to give up. For at least 15 to 30 critical minutes, he physically stopped paramedics from getting to her. An ambulance was waiting just feet away, and he kept them back. That standoff ended up lasting for 4 hours.
And here is the most heartbreaking fact of this entire case. The chief medical examiner later testified that Triffie Wadman's injuries were survivable. The gunshot wound was not immediately fatal. The reason she died is because she bled to death while medical help was being held off. Had she received immediate attention, she almost certainly would have lived.
Now, Pardy's defense tried to argue the shooting was a tragic accident during a struggle, but the forensic evidence just completely dismantled that story. There was no muzzle burn on her skin, which means the gun was fired from a distance. The wound showed her arm was likely raised up like she was trying to defend herself. And she had abrasions consistent with being dragged after she was shot. Piece by piece, the accident theory just fell apart.
So when you put everything together, the threatening texts, Triffie's 911 call, the standoff that prevented medical aid, and all that forensic evidence, the prosecution walked into court with what was truly an overwhelming case for first-degree murder.
And the jury saw it that way too. After a 4-week trial, they came back with a guilty verdict in less than 2 hours. I mean, that is incredibly fast, and it just tells you how cut and dry the evidence must have been for them.
Trevor Pardy got the mandatory sentence, life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. He did try to appeal his conviction in 2017, but it was unanimously shot down. The court basically said the evidence of planning and deliberation was just too powerful to ignore.
So, with the criminal case officially closed, that brings us right back to the civil lawsuit and its much, much bigger questions. Because this is no longer just about one family's tragic loss. It's about redefining what our responsibility is as a community when we see the warning signs of intimate partner violence.
The lawyer for Triffie's daughter explains their argument with a really simple but powerful analogy. He says, look, if you discover a fire in a building and you know people are inside, you have a responsibility to pull the fire alarm. Well, this lawsuit argues that intimate partner violence is the fire, and a warning to the police or the potential victim is the alarm.
And this isn't some abstract legal theory. This is incredibly relevant right now. Police data shows that in Newfoundland and Labrador, reported cases of intimate partner violence skyrocketed by 150% between 2019 and 2023. That context is exactly why advocates for this case say establishing a legal duty to warn is more urgent than ever.
Today, the systemic response to this issue is evolving. We're seeing more calls to declare gender-based violence an epidemic, more awareness campaigns, and there are new tools like Clare's Law, which lets people check if a partner has a violent past, and emergency protection orders. These are all vital protections that simply were not available to help Triffie Wadman back in 2011.
Which really leaves us with this final, massive question. For so long, society has treated violence within a relationship as a private matter. But this lawsuit challenges that idea head-on. It forces all of us to ask, at what point does private violence become a matter of public safety? And when it does, who is responsible for pulling the alarm?